Imagine this. You've saved for months to visit your grandkids, booked your flight, packed your suitcase, and arrived at the airport early like you always do. You're standing in line at security, thinking about the hugs waiting on the other side. Then suddenly, an officer looks at your ID, pauses, and says something that makes your heart sink. This isn't valid anymore. In that moment, your plans collapse. Your ticket becomes worthless, your trip disappears, and your wallet takes the hit. That's the reality many Americans, especially seniors, could face starting January 2026 if they don't know about the latest travel ID changes. These aren't small adjustments or technical updates buried in government paperwork. These are real changes that could affect whether you can board a plane, visit family, or even take a long-planned vacation. And the most surprising part? Many people still haven't heard about them. For seniors over 65, these updates could be even more important. Many older Americans rely on familiar IDs they've carried for years, assuming they're still valid. But the rules are shifting, and what worked last year might not work anymore. The Transportation Security Administration has been preparing for this transition, and the message is clear. Starting in 2026, certain forms of identification will no longer be accepted for domestic air travel. If your ID doesn't meet the new standards, you could be turned away at the airport. No flight, no refund, no exceptions. So before you pack your bags or book that next trip, you need to know exactly what's changing, who it affects, and what steps you must take to protect your travel plans and your wallet. Because the next time you step into an airport, the rules might be very different from what you remember. And the first change could impact millions of Americans overnight. The Real ID deadline becomes reality. For years, the Real ID requirement felt like a distant deadline, something the government kept pushing back. But starting in January 2026, the transition becomes real for travelers across the country. That means your standard driver's license may no longer be enough to get you through airport security. A Real ID is a special version of a driver's license or state ID that meets federal security standards. You can usually spot it by the star in the upper corner. If your ID doesn't have that star, it may not be accepted at airport checkpoints, and that could be a shock for many seniors who have used the same license for decades without any issues. Here's where things get serious. If you show up at the airport without a Real ID or another approved document, you may be denied entry at the security checkpoint. It doesn't matter if your flight is in 2 hours. It doesn't matter if you've flown dozens of times before. Without the right ID, you could be stuck in the terminal watching your plane take off without you. For seniors on fixed incomes, that could mean losing hundreds of dollars in non-refundable tickets, hotel reservations, and travel costs. And for those traveling to see family or attend important events, the emotional impact could be even greater. This change isn't meant to punish travelers. It's part of a long-planned federal effort to standardize identification and improve security. But that doesn't make the transition any less stressful for those who aren't prepared. And the Real ID deadline is only the first of several changes that could affect your next trip. Passports become the backup lifeline. If your driver's license doesn't meet the new standards, there's one document that can still save your trip: your passport. In fact, starting in 2026, passports may become the most reliable form of identification for domestic flights. Many Americans only think about passports when traveling internationally. But under the new rules, a valid passport can serve as your golden ticket through airport security, even for flights within the United States. For seniors, this could be especially important. Some older Americans no longer drive and rely on state IDs that may not be Real ID compliant. Others may have licenses issued years ago that haven't been updated. In those cases, a passport could be the simplest solution. But there's a catch. Passport processing times can be unpredictable, especially during peak travel seasons. If you wait until the last minute to apply or renew, you could find yourself in a stressful race against the clock. And remember, passports expire. If yours is tucked away in a drawer, now is the time to check the expiration date. Many countries, and some travel rules, require passports to be valid for months beyond your travel date. So while a passport can act as your safety net, it only works if it's valid, up to date, and ready when you need it. And that leads to the next major change, one that could catch frequent travelers completely off guard. Expired IDs will face stricter enforcement. In the past, some travelers were able to get through security with recently expired IDs, especially during special circumstances. But starting in 2026, those exceptions may become much harder to rely on. The updated enforcement approach is expected to tighten the rules around expired identification. That means if your license or passport has passed its expiration date, you could face delays, additional screening, or even denial at the checkpoint. For seniors, this is a critical detail. Many older Americans don't travel frequently, so it's easy to forget when an ID expires. You might pull out your passport or license only to realize it's been expired for months or even years. And here's the reality. Airport security doesn't operate on good intentions. It operates on valid documents. Even if you've flown before with the same ID, the new enforcement could be much stricter. That means checking expiration dates isn't just a good idea. It's essential. Because one overlooked detail could turn your dream trip into a costly mistake. And the next change could affect how long it takes to get through security, even if your ID is perfectly valid. Extra identity checks for non-compliant IDs. Travelers without real ID-compliant identification may face more than just a warning. Starting in 2026, they could encounter additional screening steps at airport checkpoints. That means longer lines, more questions, and potentially more stress before you even reach your gate. For seniors, especially those with mobility issues or tight connections, extra screening could make travel significantly more difficult. Imagine arriving early, thinking you have plenty of time, only to be pulled aside for additional verification because your ID doesn't meet the new requirements. Suddenly, the clock starts ticking, and every minute feels like an hour. This isn't meant to scare travelers. It's meant to ensure that identification standards are consistent across the country. But the reality is simple. Compliant IDs will move faster, and non-compliant ones may slow you down. And for those traveling during busy holiday seasons, that delay could mean the difference between boarding your flight and watching the doors close without you. But the next change could hit even closer to home for seniors, especially those who rely on special identification cards. State-issued IDs face new scrutiny. Not all state IDs are created equal. Starting in 2026, only certain versions of state-issued identification will be accepted at airport checkpoints. That means older IDs, temporary IDs, or certain specialty cards may no longer qualify as valid travel documents. Seniors who rely on non-driver IDs could be especially affected. Many older Americans assume that any government-issued ID should be enough. But under the new standards, only IDs that meet federal requirements will be accepted. If your ID doesn't meet those standards, you could be turned away, even if it was issued by your state. That's why it's so important to check whether your ID is real ID compliant or to carry a valid passport as a backup. This change isn't about making travel harder. It's about creating a uniform system that security officers can rely on nationwide. But for travelers who aren't aware of the new rules, the consequences could be immediate and expensive, and the next update could affect how seniors plan their trips months in advance. Longer processing times for new IDs. As the 2026 deadline approaches, demand for real IDs and passport renewals is expected to surge. That could lead to longer wait times at state offices and federal processing centers. For seniors, this could become a major inconvenience. Standing in long lines or waiting months for documents can be stressful, especially if travel plans are already scheduled. Imagine realizing you need a real ID just weeks before your flight. You head to the DMV, only to find appointments booked solid for the next month. Suddenly, your trip is at risk, not because of the flight, but because of paperwork. That's why acting early could save you time, stress, and money. Applying for a compliant ID now means avoiding the rush later. And as more Americans scramble to meet the deadline, those who wait could face the longest delays. But there's another change that could surprise even experienced travelers. Name matching rules become more important. Starting in 2026, travelers may need to pay closer attention to how their names appear on their IDs and tickets. Even small differences, like a missing middle name or a different last name, could cause delays at security or boarding. For seniors, this could be especially relevant. Many older travelers have gone through name changes due to marriage, divorce, or legal updates. If your ticket and your ID don't match closely enough, you could face additional questioning. This doesn't mean every minor difference will cause a problem, but as identification standards tighten, accuracy becomes more important than ever. The safest approach is simple. Make sure the name on your airline ticket matches the name on your ID as closely as possible. That small step could save you from unnecessary stress at the airport, and the next change could determine whether you travel smoothly or face unexpected obstacles. Senior travelers could feel the biggest impact. While these changes apply to everyone, seniors over 65 may feel the effects more strongly. Many older Americans rely on long-standing IDs, travel less frequently, or assume the rules haven't changed. But starting in 2026, those assumptions could lead to real problems at the airport. A license that worked for years might suddenly be rejected. An expired passport might cause delays. A non-compliant state ID could trigger extra screening. For seniors on fixed incomes, the financial impact could be serious. Missed flights, rebooking fees, and unexpected travel costs can add up quickly. That's why preparation is so important. Checking your ID now, renewing documents early, and understanding the new rules could save you hundreds of dollars and a lot of stress. And the final change isn't about documents at all. It's about mindset. As these 2026 travel ID changes roll out, one thing becomes clear. Preparation is your best protection. The travelers who stay informed, update their documents, and plan ahead will move through airports with confidence. But those who ignore the changes could face delays, denials, and unexpected expenses. And for seniors, the stakes can be even higher, both financially and emotionally. So here's the simple message. Check your ID today. Look for the real ID star. Verify your passport's expiration date. Make sure your travel documents match your ticket. These small steps could be the difference between a smooth trip and a stressful, expensive mistake. Because at the end of the day, this isn't just about paperwork. It's about your plans, your family, and your wallet. It's about making sure the trips you've worked so hard for actually happen. Stay informed, stay prepared, and keep watching for updates because the rules are changing and the next announcement could affect your next trip.